Welcome back. This is part 4 of the vaping workshop. We're going to be going over the advanced rebuildables part of this. My name is Ryan Bliss. I'm with the Vapor Depot. The first thing we're going to be going over is how to build a rebuildable RBtA. And what that stands for is a rebuildable tank atomizer, bottom line. So basic steps of doing it is just simply taking your atomizer apart, whether it's a tank atomizer or a dripper. Clean the atomizer if you've already used it. If it's brand new, obviously you won't need to do that. We're going to be attaching a new coil. I'll show you how to do some 4 or 5 wraps. There's a ton of different wraps you can do, but bottom line is a coil's a coil's a coil, and all you're trying to do is create resistance to heat the thing up. So all these different diamond wraps and things that are going on out there, whatever, you're never going to see it. The best way to do it is just a standard wrap, and I'll show you how to do that. We're going to be using some basic stuff you're going to be able to find around your house. With the exception of a multimeter. I don't happen to have a multimeter on me. I actually just brought in an actual ohm tester for atomizers, which we will be offering in the store here shortly, as well as some wire jigs, so it'll make it a lot easier to wrap wires for you. And then you'll simply attach your new coil. We'll show you how to reassemble it. We're going to be using a K-Fun, just wrapping a single coil for now. We're getting into some more advanced stuff later, doing dual coils, how to figure out your ohms and amperages levels on those, and we'll even get into some quad coil stuff if one of our new mods passes our QT, or QC I should say. And after you're done with that, it's as simple as just easily vaping it. So wrapping the coil. Rebuilding an atomizer basically just means you're wrapping a coil. That's all it is. It's as simple as that. It's the logical next step for people to go to who have been using standard e-cigs anyway. The number of wraps that you use on a coil using your Kanthal wire, and the only type of wire we're going to sell to you guys is the very best. It's the A1 Kanthal out there, and they're all annealed metals, so they're the best out there. So the number of wraps is going to determine your resistance. Resistance is ohmage, okay? And your first one that you're ever going to wrap is going to be the hardest one you ever do. Believe me, I know, I've tried. So the 4 or 5 wrap, which is the most standard wrap that we do out there for a coil, it just means that there's always going to be a half of a wrap missing. So when you're wrapping a coil, you're going to be going around usually an 1/8 inch drill bit, which is what we're going to use today. Most people have those in their garage or at home somewhere. And you're going to go around it 4 times over the top. On the bottom, or actually 5 times over the top, and on the bottom side you're going to have 4 wraps. So you'll count 5 wraps on the top, on the bottom is 4 wraps. You'll end up with roughly about an ohm. You want to try to shoot for half ohm to an ohm on these. The number of wraps doesn't necessarily matter so long as you're not going to go too sub-ohmed on it, especially if you're using an APV unit that has circuitry in it. You can't necessarily step too far below an ohm on those, or 1.1. And there's only about 7 steps to really rebuild a RBtA or an RDA. So, disassembling and cleaning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to step over here, kind of go down and do this with you guys. So as I said before, this is the K-Fun. This is what we're going to be rebuilding. What also comes in the K-Fun box is some silicate, I don't know what you want to call this stuff. It's wicking material, but I never use this stuff. I've never been very happy with it. You also have some extra seals, some extra post screws that come in with it as well. You have a little window that you can swap out pieces in the middle of this thing so that you can see your liquid, but we also carry one that is a full window system for this. And then it's also going to come with a little complimentary 3-inch, 4-inch chunk of wire, about 28 gauge there, and a little screwdriver set here that gives you a Phillips and a straight head. Only thing I'm going to need right now is going to be the unit itself. We're going to simply break this down. So I'll take off the mouthpiece first, and then I'm going to break this baby apart. And the only thing that's really important to take apart right now is from the base. The sections in here can stay together because I'm not going to put on any window units in it or anything like that. So I'll just take the base off. This will pull off the top like this. So we'll set this off to the side. Then what you're left with is the barrel and the chimney and the base itself that screws into your mod. So the next piece to come off is going to be the chimney. We'll unscrew the chimney, then we're going to unscrew the barrel. Set that aside. So now you're left here with your single coil setup, and you have two screws here. You have a positive and negative terminal. Okay? Down on the underside here, you'll see where the liquid channels in to go into your wicking material, which is going to be stuffed down on either side here to collect the liquid. So I'm going to grab my Phillips set first. I'm going to back off these posts so that I can fit the 28 gauge wire underneath it. Set that to the side. I'm going to set that unit to the side there. I'm going to get my mod ready, and for this particular unit it's kind of a little bit of an overkill, but I'm going to use a sledgehammer mod using a 26650 3500 milliamp hour battery rated at 35 amps. And then I'm going to grab the trusty old 1/8 inch drill bit and my 28 gauge wire, and I use about a 3 inch to 4 inch chunk of this. And what I like to do is I like to place it on the bottom, so I'm holding the drill bit kind of like this. Like that. So we'll do a 4 or 5 wrap. This will give us about an ohm, maybe 1.1 ohms on this particular model. I'm showing you this particular one to get the ohmage a little bit higher because it's a safety rating mostly for most batteries because you don't want to draw too much current. But when you do sub-ohming, you want to be using batteries that are rated at a much higher amperage. So leave yourself about about 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch of a tail underneath it, and you're going to start your wrap. You want to keep these coils tight and as close together as possible. So there's 2, 3, and 4. So now when I finish this, looking down on it, I have 4 wraps on the top. If I turn it over on the bottom side, with the wires, obviously the leads are pointing in opposite directions, I should have 5 wraps down here. Okay? What I like to do is I like to leave this whole wrap system on the bit itself because with 28 gauge wire especially, they can kind of overlap and whatnot, and manipulating it around your base here while you're trying to attach it, it's a little bit easier to keep it on here. So then I'll take the short end of the lead, I'll place this guy just kind of like this in the middle, like this. You want to wrap it from the left side of the screw around it to the right side of the screw because you're going to be tightening it down to the right. Otherwise, if you do it the other way, you can loosen the wire. The other nice thing about keeping the bit in here is it allows, while you're tightening, it holds all the coils in place so that they don't spread out while you're tightening the screw. So I'll get my first post tightened down here while maintaining pressure against that post so that the wire doesn't slip out. I'm going to tighten it nice and tight. Kind of flip this guy over a little bit here. I'll take my long lead and I'll do the same thing from the left side of the screw to the right around it. Keeping it tight. And I'll tighten this down. Okay. So they're tightened down. What I like to do at this point is kind of pull up on it. This tightens the coils. So I'm pulling up on the bit while the bit's still threaded through the coils. And it allows me to center it and get it right where I want it. And it also allows me to make sure that there's nothing cross-connecting on the coils touching any other metal part of the base itself, because that can cause a short, and shorts are not really good things to have, except for in the summer. That was a joke. Must not have been that funny. Okay. So that looks pretty good. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pull the bit out. and get rid of any of this excess wire that I have here. And you want to snip these as, you know, fairly close to the post, but you don't want any excess hanging over that could touch the barrel or anything, like I said earlier, that it could short out on. If I can get it to cooperate. Get the other side. So any excess wire, you just kind of tuck it up over the screw. So you're, like I said before, I'm making a big point of this, you don't want it to short out on anything. Okay. At this point, I'll attach it to the sledgehammer mod. And this part's fairly crucial. We're going to use a pair of Leatherman needle nose pliers. And you want to be gentle when you do this. You don't want to squeeze too hard. The whole idea of this part here is just to get the actual wires themselves, the loops, as close together as possible, because when you fire it up, you want to have a consistent glowing red at the same time. You don't want any hot spots or cool spots. So I'm going to do one more tightening with the bit to get everything where it should be. And then let's fire this thing up. See how it has a kind of a hot spot there? Just gently squeeze the coils together. Use this guy one more time. And you just finesse this and finesse it until you get it to how you want it to be. But like I am recommending, you want these to fire up as congruently as possible. Almost there. And so now there's no hot spots. It's all firing at the same time. Everything's flowing through at pretty much the same rate because all the wires are close together. At that point, what you're going to do is you're going to take some organic, and the reason why we use organic cotton or whatever you want to use for wicking, you can use the silicate stuff, but what we have found is that the organic Japanese cotton is the best way to use. It's combed so that the fibers are in one direction. That allows for wicking to be consistent. And you roll it into kind of like a little thread like this. Okay? You make the end piece kind of sharp. You just thread it right through that hole in the center where we have the drill bit. And gently pull it through. Sometimes you get these little fat spots in the wick material that you just kind of have to work through. I'll go from a different direction here. It's good that you guys see that some of these things can be a little pain in the butt sometimes. So I'll pull off that fatty area. I'll retighten the end here. Thread it again. Now it's moving through nicely. So you just pull through just like that. There you go. Okay, so at this point then, what I would do is I would snip a little bit of this off here. And then I'll grab the barrel. I'll lift these two leads of the wick back up. I'm going to slide the barrel over them, like so. And sometimes you have to finesse it with something else to get the other one through because they like to tuck into each other. Drop it down like so. Screw the barrel down on the base. And as a rule, you want these to be about a 1/2 inch over the top edge of this base. So somewhere up in here, this ballpark. Like that. So now you have these 2 leads up here like this. 2 parts of your wick. And what we're going to do is we're going to be tucking this down so that it sits down inside this channel here, this very small channel, to pull the liquid into and up through the wick and up into the coil area. So I'll just use something sharp, or really the best thing to use is, believe it or not, tweezers. And just kind of start stuffing this stuff down in here like so. Into those channels. You don't want to push down too hard and compact it too hard, otherwise you make the wicking capabilities a little bit more difficult on the unit, and you might end up with some dry hits, and those don't taste very good. Switch to this side. All right, so when you're done, it's going to look a little something like that. Okay, so you should be able to see the coils just fine with the wicks tucked in down below in those little recesses off to the side where the liquid comes through from the tank. Okay. At that point, you would take about 10 to 12 drops and just saturate the liquid, the cotton wicking right here. Okay, so you don't have to sit there and drag on it and drag on it and drag on it to get it to saturate. It's better just to pre-saturate that. Once you have that done, we're going to go ahead and put the chimney stack back on. Then we'll take the outer cover, the tank piece itself, slip it over the top, and screw it down. And then you can, if you want at this point, put the mouthpiece on, or you can wait. At this point, since most of these tank models, except for the new version 4 that came out, which we'll be getting in here shortly, you would unscrew it from your mod, and on the bottom here you'll see this larger screw. That's where you would use like a syringe or something, or if you have a needle bottle, you can fill it at this point. So you take the screw out, fill it up. You want to leave yourself a little bit of a bubble area so it doesn't have too much back pressure, which also kind of tends to stop the liquid from flowing in. So you want to leave that bubble. This other screw here on the K-Fun is for airflow control. And where it's set right about now is about right. Some people like a little bit more restriction, some people like a little less restriction. So the main important thing is to make sure that this screw doesn't back out all the way. So every time you do fill your K-Fun, you want to check that screw and make sure it is in, because as you can see with some of these mods, they have these little grooves and doohickeys here, which are made for airflow for these guys. But if this screw, because of the size of the screw, is fairly small, if it happens to back out and this is screwed in, then it acts like a little peg and it makes it really difficult to get these back out. So that's how to build your K-Fun. At that point, after filling it, all you have to do is hook it up to your mod and vape. But one super crucial important part, super crucial, before filling it really, is to test your ohms. And so I have right here just a little ohm tester. And like I said, we'd hit somewhere around 1 ohm on a 28 gauge 4-5 rep. If you want those ohms to be more sub-ohm, you would back off 1 round. It would probably get you down to somewhere around 0.7 in that ballpark, which is still pretty good. So that one's ready to go. And that's how you build those guys. So we check resistance, and anybody can check resistance from home just by simply having a multimeter. It's probably one of the best tools anybody can own anyway, is a multimeter. You can check anything from volts, amps, everything. Simple Ohm's law, understanding how that works. Basically the way I like to the best way I was ever taught, because I used to be an electrician, was is you've got this guy who's in this pipe and behind him is volts. The guy in the pipe is amps. He's being pushed by volts, and he comes about this restricted area, which was created by ohms. Okay. So if you can look at it that way, I don't know if your imagination is that good or not, but so choosing the proper gauge is essential. Margin of error is greater with variable volt devices, and the reason why that is because they have circuitry in them. There's protected circuitry, like I said earlier. A lot of those units will not allow you to sub-ohm, okay, because of its protective circuitry in it to protect the battery. And a lot of batteries, people are buying batteries and not sure what they're getting. We sell Sony, some Samsung, and EFES batteries. Those seem to be the best ones for this, especially for 35 amp, 30 amp rated batteries. Unregulated devices such as these, they need to be more precise, and that's why you want to test and check your resistance. If you get too low of an ohmage and you're going past the current ratings or amperage ratings for your batteries, the batteries can heat up, and they can heat up to a point that they start to vent noxious fumes. And if they get too far, then they can actually explode, and that's where they start causing bodily harm. Okay? So you want to be very, very careful with that, and of course we're here at the Vapor Depot to help you choose and pick and make sure you're getting a safe setup. But as it says here, practice does make perfect. This is a chart of fairly common wiring gauges that are used for Kenthal A1 wire. As you can see, 22 gauge wire, which is a thicker wire. Ohms in inches, so for every inch of that wire, your ohmage is going to be right around 0.11 ohms. Okay? All the way down to your most common wire gauges, which are like 26 and 28, all the way to 32, but some people will use that angel hair 36 gauge wire, and as you can see, the thinner the wire you go, the higher the resistance you have. Okay? And then at this point, obviously, after checking your voltage, you would fill it with liquid and then start vaping. The next section we're going to get into is mechanical mods. That's the piece below your RDA or your RBA or RBTA that houses basically the battery. Most mods are not going to have any kind of circuitry in them that's going to protect anything. You're in manual mode, 100%. You're running with a 3.7 battery, fully charged, or maybe running at about 4.2 volts, but at no point is your coil, which is basically a resistor that you've built in your RBA, ever going to see 4 volts by the time it actually gets there, okay, or 4.2 volts. It'll be somewhere usually between 3.7 and 4 volts on a full charge. Mechanical mods are becoming much more common. They were pretty much introduced by your little back alley garage experiment people who were building them out of little lozenges, tin cans, using all kinds of crazy circuitry. They were pretty dangerous at the time to do things like that. They've come a long way in their technology and how they're able to make sure that there are some safety features for venting the battery if something did overheat, things like that. They've got your typical spring-loaded switches, which is your firing pin. They've got magnetic switches. They've got lockout units, which is kind of important to have as well because you don't want the thing going off in your pocket if it happens to bump up against something in your pocket that causes it to start up. They differ from Eagle batteries and MVPs due to the fact that they have a removable battery, whereas these other models, such as the Eagle batteries and MVPs, have enclosed battery systems, okay, along with a bunch of circuitry. Standard metal tube, just like this one here, with a firing pin on the bottom. That's basically all a mod is. It's a battery enclosure. They are more durable, and they are definitely far more modifiable because you are the one that gets to tinker around with the ohmage. And because these other units out there have battery protection, because they don't want the Eagle battery blowing up in your hand, it allows you to sub-ohm these particular units with a much more powerful battery. And a little bit about battery safety, which is really important. Probably one of the most important topics right now dealing with mods is battery safety. Batteries can fail due to simply over-tightening these two end caps. You over-tighten the two end caps, batteries can fail. Because what tends to happen is they just basically have a metal bottom, which is your negative pole, and your metal top. If you tighten those too much, you're going to cause them to touch parts of the battery that they shouldn't, and you create a short basically in the battery. Batteries can over discharge due to accidental firing, which is what we were talking about before. Having a lockout system on your switch itself is super important. So there's nothing like with a lot of our Eagle batteries, if you hit them for 10 seconds, they will cut off on their own to protect you. Okay? You don't ever want to buy a mechanical mod sight unseen. Don't. Being in this business for almost 6 years, I've had countless manufacturers send me countless units to test and demo. I will honestly say that 98% of them get thrown away. They're garbage. And the only thing that we sell here at the Vapor Depot is the top of the line, the best stuff, tried and true stuff for mods. Always inspect these mods before you buy them and use them. A little bit in the way of some pro tips using mechanical mods. Like I said earlier, you always want to make sure that there is a locking mechanism of some sort on your switch, your firing pin itself. You want to check that the mod has vent holes, that it's, if the battery did heat up, it has the ability to allow those noxious gases to vent from the actual tube itself. You want to make sure that the batteries are never going to be over or undercharged. That would be a really cheap charger that ever did that. All the chargers that we offer, like I said here, we use Trustfire, eFest, and eFest chargers. They all have circuitry built in that allow the battery to cap out at a certain point. You want to make sure that when you are charging your batteries, you don't really want them to dip too far below 3.6 volts at low mean use. Okay? Anything lower than that, then you start setting memory in your lithium-ion battery system. So why mechanical mods as opposed to standard personal vaporizers? Honestly, it is the logical next step to move to after using like a variable volt or a variable watt model like an Ego or an enclosed battery system. They're more advanced users tend to want to try newer technology that's out there. I can attest to that. Okay, you tend to, once you start to master something, it's kind of like having your first car. If it was a Ford Pinto, you want to step up to something that has a little bit different, like daytime running lights or a fancier stereo that has more settings, maybe a 7-band EQ as opposed to just a 2-dial stereo system. It's just a natural step in progress. The rebuilding of these things is far more cost effective than constantly having to buy new wicks or a whole new clearomizer system like the CE4s, or having to buy T5 refills or RBC refills. It's just a lot cheaper in the long run for the end user. The other thing that's nice about these is there's far less to go wrong with them. There's less electrical stuff. There's less circuitry that you have to worry about going wrong. We deal with many times, and we have lifetime warranty for our customers on our batteries, and it's almost always something. It's not the battery inside the casing that goes wrong, it's the circuitry that controls the battery before it even gets to the atomizer that goes wrong, or maybe a button or something, but it's almost always the circuitry. So less stuff to go wrong with something like this. Lower ohms, like it's like jailbreaking a phone. Okay, bottom line, you're able to get into sub-ohm operations, and lower ohms equals more amps, which equals more power, which means faster vaporization. So instead of grabbing an Ego battery, hitting the button, and taking the time to get to your mouth, and then slowly take your drag to get a decent hit, with these here, it's as simple as boom, they're on. Okay? Faster vaporization means better flavor. You're extracting more of the flavor because you're extracting more of the liquid. You're vaporizing more of the liquid. And of course, that also means bigger clouds of vapor too, which is always fun. So who should use mechanical mods? Vapors who want stronger flavors. People who definitely have a solid understanding of Ohm's law. Okay? You don't have to have like a doctorate degree in Ohm's law. Just understand how amps affect volts, affect current, affect resistance, and how they all interrelate. And we can teach you some of that here. And understand that safety is always going to be number one with these, and especially when you're talking about the batteries, because the batteries is everything when it comes to safety with a mod. And that brings us to battery safety basics. Don't overcharge them or over discharge them. With any of our charging systems, that won't happen. Okay? Rule of thumb is once a battery is fully charged, take it off the charger. Okay? Most of the chargers out there Today though, you can leave them on there because the circuitry built into the charger knows when the battery is fully charged and will cut it off. It'll just stop charging it, but it will keep it at a full charge. You want to recharge your batteries with a resting voltage of 3.6 volts or lower as soon as possible. Otherwise, what happens with any lithium-ion batteries, you create memory. So the longer they stay uncharged, the faster they're going to stay uncharged. You see what I'm saying? The battery won't last that long. Don't short circuit your batteries. Basically what this means is have something to carry your batteries in if you're carrying more than one battery. Don't ever carry a battery in a pocket that has any coins or metal objects like keys, things like that, because you're going to create a short circuit. And that's essentially what we're doing with a mod. We're creating a controlled short circuit. We're basically building with a coil a resistor, and we're connecting one end of that coil to the negative and the other end to a positive. So we are short circuiting the battery to create this, but it's in a controlled environment. Okay? We know that using this kind of ohmage is going to produce these results, and it's safe. But when you do that with God knows what is in your pocket or in your purse, okay, you can cause things to blow up, and that's not good. Or you can get burnt or any kind of serious injury. So don't do that. Try to carry any of your batteries in like a little pouch or something that keeps them isolated. Or if you have a special zipper in your purse or whatever, keep them in there separated from each other. Don't ever let the batteries touch each other. And obviously this isn't rocket science. Don't throw batteries in fires. Okay? Big no-no. Big no-no. Not good for the environment, and if you're standing too close, definitely not good for you. These are just some battery spec sheets off of some common batteries that are used in mods. 18350 specs, nominal voltage. It's just basically, most batteries are going to run at 3.7 volts. This 18350 model here runs at 700 milliamp hours. Our 18350s that we sell here are going to be running at 900. How to figure out your amperage is pretty simple. You just divide your milliamp hour divided by 1,000. Okay. So for like one of our 900 milliamp hour batteries, if you're using it in a stack system, that means that that battery individually is going to be running about 9 amps output. Okay. Which would be max output for 9 amps. Stacked together are going to be 18 amps and whatnot. This is just a lot of mumbo jumbo, but just so you know, we do keep everything here. We know and have tested all of our batteries to make sure that they're going to work perfectly with your mods. Same with the 18650, 1600s. That particular unit would be running at 16 amp output. 18650, 2000 milliamp hour, and whatnot. So you're determining your discharge rate for each of the battery. Using this information. So knowing your discharge rate is only part of the story. And this is where I was talking to our social marketer earlier, Charity, who you'd seen in previous videos. A lot of this is kind of unnecessary to go over for your average user. It maybe can look pretty scary. Okay, it's like, why would I even care to learn this stuff? I'll just stick with my ego battery. Well, it's important to a point because we just want to make sure that everybody's going to be safe, and that if you're buying from anywhere else who maybe doesn't have this kind of knowledge or the ability to convey it for you and teach you how to do it, that at least you are smart enough to get online or whatever and learn this for yourself. You can even get an ohm calculator as an app for your phone. It's as simple as that, where all you have to do is know, okay, my battery is, using a multimeter, it's at 4 volts, and I know my ohms are here, so it'll totally calculate everything else out as to what kind of a battery you can safely use. Really simple. They're free on the App Store. So the easiest equation to use is battery volts divided by the resistance of your coil will always equal your actual discharge rate. Like I said, the app has it. You don't even have to do the math anymore. So as a recap, number one, calculate your battery's capacity in amps and your capacity in milliamp hours. To find that out, basically, is just to divide what your milliamp hour of your battery is by 1,000, and you'll figure out what your capacity in amps is. You can calculate your maximum discharge rate by using your maximum discharge rate equals your battery capacity in amps times your continuous discharge rate. Measure your battery's volts with a multimeter. Like I said before, I can't stress it enough, multimeters are incredible tools. Everybody should have one, especially if you're using a mod. It makes no sense if you don't have one. Measure the ohms of your coil and subtract 0.2 to account for the plus or minus 0.2 variance. So if like the one that we built earlier, we knew that it was sitting at about an ohm. Okay, so I would subtract 0.2, and to play it safe, I'm going to say that it's a 0.8 ohm wrap. Okay, and then figure your math from there for your battery. Calculate the discharge rate you'll have with the coil that you've built. So battery divided by ohms equals your actual discharge rate for your battery. And then check to make sure that the actual discharge rate is lower than your battery's maximum discharge rate. And that makes, you probably want to go back and listen to that again. But I won't repeat myself. And that pretty much concludes Advanced Vaping Workshop. Anything else we'd be happy to go over with you here and show you how it's done. It's really not that hard, and it's not as scary as it looks up on the projector. But feel free to come in, and thanks for taking the time to look at the video.